live now.
Okay, hi folks. Welcome to today's session. So we're looking at Microsoft licensing, specifically around the Power Platform dynamics, and we've got some other gems in there as well. So to kick things off, I'll do a bit of an introduction. So my name is Jay Fitzhenry. I'm one of the business solutions consultants here at Visual. My main role is specifically around the Power Platform, but also how that can integrate with other products and solutions you may already have in your organization. I also look at doing a lot of process automation as well. So if there's things that come up throughout the presentation, don't hesitate to ask a question. We've got Grace, who's our producer on this call, so she should be able to send those through to me. In terms of the agenda, we've got four sort of key areas I want to run through. So we have a product introduction. Typically, we're going to touch on the different products inside of the Power Platform, what they're about, some of the features that you can expect, and then we'll move on to the licensing breakdown. Now, in terms of the licensing breakdown, this is going to cover everything from your standard user licenses, but also what you may already be paying for that you probably don't know. You'll find that a lot of the licenses that many organizations have give you access to some of the products in the Power Platform, which is always nice to hear. Then we're going to touch on Dynamics. Now, I know some of you probably don't use Dynamics, some of you love it, some of you hate it. Either way, I'm going to touch on why that can be a good next step for your organization and some of the licensing considerations and the breakdown. It's quite a beast in itself, so it may not cover every aspect of licensing for the specific product, but hopefully you'll get the core components that will help you make the decision to either adopt it or how to make most of your current investment. And then finally, we're going to touch on some client examples. Now, there's no named clients in this presentation, but we'll touch on some of the example architectures that we've done for them, how they've licensed it, and hopefully you'll see maybe some similarities or some ideas around next steps. Okay. Now, again, if you've got any questions throughout, send them through. I'll probably end up answering them all towards the end of the presentation. I do have a view my end. But yeah, if I'll answer those at the end of the presentation. So the first one I'm going to touch on is essentially what is the Power Platform. I appreciate that some of you probably are fully aware of what this is, some of you not so much. So I'll give you a nice high-level overview and some of the components that exist within it. In the slide at the moment, what you can see is we've got Power BI, so that's going to be around your reporting, analytics. Powerapps, so how do we take data from end users? How do we present data to them? Power Automate, so that's taking your data, doing an element of automation, and by that could be notifications, enriching your data, performing some advanced analytics. And last but not least, of the four products there, we've got Power Virtual Agents. Relatively new compared to the other ones, but this is around your chatbots and taking data from potentially your clients, bringing it into a central data location and making decisions on the data that you receive. Now, underpinning those four products, we have three other services. I say services, these aren't necessarily paid for, they just come along with that investment. So we've got the Common Data Service, that's essentially your central data repository, and we'll touch on that in more detail later on. We have data connectors, so that is when you're connecting to your data from these applications. Typically, you set up a connector to help you pass that data to and fro. We may also touch on how you can use things like on-premise data gateways to consume your on-premise data. And last but not least, we've got the AI Builder. So that is taking your data, applying a machine learning model on top, and enriching the data that you're getting through. So if you're looking at potentially sentiment analysis, text analysis, image recognition, again, that's probably something that you'd be looking into. So if we touch on the first product of the stack, we have Powerapps. We have quite a number of things in here, which should be interesting. Now, well, what are Powerapps? Essentially, these are applications that sit within your 365 tenant. They allow users to create applications from their own data without having necessarily an expert level knowledge on app development. Typically, what you'll find is some users will store data in a variety of different mediums, and actually trying to write into there, trying to pull data out of it can be quite difficult. Can sometimes require external help to actually build tools to interface with it. What you may also find is you've already got applications in your business that don't provide you all the functionality that you need. Powerapps can leverage essentially the same data sources that sit behind them and provide an alternate method of interacting with that data and allowing users to consume data from those sources. Now, one of the nice things around this is it's no to low code. So rather than having to skill up everyone on how to use Powerapps, how to use essentially a programming language, if that's what you can call it, typically you'll find that those users can just use a series of templates out of the box. If you've ever used SharePoint Online, you'll notice that in lists you can quickly create a Powerapp, and that way you can allow users to create a tool that allows them to make their jobs easier. Adding to that, rather than just connect to one data source, we can get to many multiple using the connectors we have available, and we'll be going into that in more detail later. And what's probably most important for everyone is the connections to your data are secure. So what I mean by that is the data in transit is at rest, is encrypted. When you're looking at where that data is located, it's also important to make sure it's encrypted at rest. But again, that won't limit you into what data you can pull through into Powerapps. The idea is we're creating an experience for a user to interact with their data in such a way that allows them to make those key business decisions without having to wait for IT support, external development, and so on. Now, what you'll typically find is if you do start using Powerapps, you may purchase some additional licenses, which is what we'll touch on shortly. And within those licenses, you'll get access to the Common Data Service. Now, what is the Common Data Service? It's probably a good question. The Common Data Service is going to be your central data repository. Now, you may have one at the moment. If you're using Dynamics 365, if you're using model-driven Powerapps, again, just a type of Powerapp, the Common Data Service will be deployed in your organization already. What you'll find as well in the coming months, with Microsoft Teams, there's something called Project Oakdale, which talks about using elements of the Common Data Service, but within Microsoft Teams. So it's probably something to look forward to. Now, we're talking about a central data repository here. Typically, when organizations have that central data location, they think of a Azure SQL database, maybe a data warehouse, maybe some other managed data source in the organization that typically requires developers, experts in the field of building a database or data model. With the Common Data Service, you don't need to worry about that. Any user in the organization, assuming they have the right permissions, assign the right roles, and so on, can make changes to this model without needing to know languages such as SQL and so on. What's also nice around the Common Data Service is it's accessible from all the products in the Power Platform, and we can also build this idea of a standardized data model. So ensuring that we're pulling data into a central location. It is structured in such a way so you're not worrying about data silos in the business, and it's allowing for that interaction across multiple products in your environment. And that sort of leads on to that final point, integrating across apps and services. So rather than just having this central location and only being limited to that, we can pull data from external sources. Recently, we've done some work with a client around Twitter analysis. So that is taking data from their social platforms, bringing it into a central location, i.e. the Common Data Service, creating that standardized model, and then consuming that data in things such as Power BI, Powerapps, and Power Automate. that leads us quite nicely onto Power Automate. So you'll probably find that in your organization, you're already using Power Automate. If not, you should. It's a really great tool that allows you to take data from a variety of different sources. Now, we're not just talking about databases here, we're talking about OneDrive, the Outlook connectors that we have in place, scheduled triggers, and so on. And with all that data and the automation we have through Power Automate, we can do a couple of things. We can make people's day-to-day lives easier by giving them email notifications when data updates, asking them to approve certain documents, and so on. But we can also start integrating systems. So that's taking data from one location and helping move it to another location, which could even be the common data service that we've mentioned previously. Now, typically, when we look at an end user using Power Automate, they are going to be creating day-to-day flows that help them with maybe some manual processes they're looking at the moment. So that could be taking an attachment out of an email and storing it into a central location. It could be giving them a prompt, asking them to do certain activities during the day. If you're using things like Planner, it could then send them an email notification saying you've got several days before you need to complete a task. Now, I've mentioned a couple of products there. It's okay if you don't know what those are, but what you should do and take away from this is, regardless of where that data is located, for the most part, Power Automate can interact with it. So if you have a variety of systems and you want to notify your users on the goings on in that system, telling them, or asking them to approve documents, asking them to capture data from other systems, Power Automate can use the same connectors as we mentioned previously, and we'll go into more detail later on. The other nice point that we touched on with Powerapps, by the concept of using templates. Power Automate have the same templates, and in fact they're always being updated. So if you maybe create your own template, you can publish that and other people can start using that. Which kind of leads into the next point of it requires little to no code. Now, don't get me wrong, for the more advanced users and maybe the more complex Power Automate flows, you may need to use a little bit of sort of business logic to actually build out that process. But even then, for the most part, it's drag and drop. If you do want to have more of a code experience, maybe Power Automate is not the right thing for you. Maybe something like Azure Logic Apps, but they fundamentally work in the same way of taking your data wherever it is in the business, applying processing, and then integrating with other systems or notifying your end users. One of the last products before we touch on Power Virtual Agents, let me just jump back there. We have Power BI. Now, Power BI is a bit of an oddity in the Power Platform. There aren't necessarily any sort of use rights licenses. I'm going to explain what those are later on. But essentially, you can either buy this as a standalone, or you can get it included with things such as the Office 365 E5 license. In summary, this is a way of interacting with your data, but presenting it in a visual way, allowing your users to make business decisions. Again, we can connect to the same data sources that we've presently connected to in Powerapps, Power Automate, and so on. But this time, rather than worrying about integrating with other systems or capturing data, we are using the power of Power BI to visualize that data in such a way that makes it meaningful and insightful. And the way that's possible is by looking at the story of your data and understanding how that bit of data has entered your system, the journey it's taken, and where it's going to end up. So we're doing quite a few of these reports at the moment with sort of most of our client base, where we're taking data from a variety of different data sources. So that could be anything from Dynamics to things like Salesforce, a variety of SQL data sources, so data warehouse, Synapse Analytics, Azure SQL databases, and so on. But we can also integrate with things such as Databricks. If you ever use that service, there's so many things that you can use with this. And even if you, let's say, don't have a connector available to you out of the box, you can potentially create your own, and we can interact with that API without a problem. The other nice thing around Power BI is it's all good making reports for yourself and then helping you make your decisions yourself. But the real thrill of using this tool is being able to share it with other people in your team. So we can now share this data across our team, allowing them to make the same decisions or understand the decisions that you're making. And finally, sometimes people in your organization may not have the correct licenses or so on. There are still ways to share this content. So we can look at using things such as Power BI Report Server, which is an on-premise offering, or just exporting your reports to things like PowerPoint, PDFs, and so on, and just sharing them via email. The last product we have in the Power Platform is Power Virtual Agents. So again, like I mentioned, this is a relatively new tool. I think it got released probably back end of last year. Essentially, this is a way of creating chatbots using low to no code. Whenever you've gone onto a website such as, we'll use an example, if you've gone to things like PC World or O2, you'll typically find that as you log into their website, it will prompt up to say, what you're after, is there something you're interested in? Now we can use Power Virtual Agents to create that same experience, to capture data from those users, to pass them through to the right pages on the site, or potentially if they want to speak to an operator or an agent, we can pass them through to your service desk. So a really good example would be you have got internal users, they need to raise a ticket. Rather than sending an email into a shared mailbox where you're trading through many hundreds of emails to view that info, they can go to a chatbot, send that through and automatically integrate that with your system. So therefore you can start automating your ticketing system and so on. The other good thing around this, and if you work in maybe a more marketing capacity, is the increased client engagement. So typically, if you think about marketing, you've got quite a lot of content being sent out onto social platforms, maybe running events like the one that we've got on today. But actually, if you're able to get feedback from your clients directly and allow them to influence how you're targeting different campaigns and content, Power Virtual Agents could be that mechanism to enable that. It won't do it all on its own, but it's part of the wider solution to help you take that data. And that's probably something else to take away from this session, that don't just look at these products as individuals, look at them as a suite. If you want to start using a product in the Power Platform, why not just look at all the products that are there? Because what you'll find is a lot of the licensing will cover everything, and you probably have access to at least 50% of the products that we're touching on. And like I mentioned at the start, it's no code, which traditionally, if you've ever wanted to create a chatbot, you're going to have to know some language. You'll need access to Azure. You'll need to understand how to actually start developing and so on. And that is typically a barrier to entry. It's very difficult for people to scale up quickly if you've got short time scales. If you need a chatbot by next week, use Power Virtual Agents. It's a nice, quick and easy way of getting something ready into a production state without having to hire third-party developers. Now, underpinning all of this, we touched on the connectors and connectivity. So currently, as it stands, there are over 350 different cloud services, content services, and so on that you can connect to using the products in the Power Platform. The odds are that's going to cover all of your needs. However, if you do have custom connectors, if you do have data sources that aren't accessible, you can always create a custom connector. They're relatively straightforward to set up, so you shouldn't have any issues there. Now, and although we're moving into this digital age where a lot of your data is located in the cloud, there are still some scenarios where your data is on premises. So that could be a back office server. It could be a variety of other on-premise data sources. Don't worry about that. We've got that under control. We can use things like data gateways to take that data from on-premises and expose it to the secure 365 and Azure platform, allowing us to consume that data and start generating further insight. And one of the sort of real key points around this is a lot of the time, your organizations won't just have one data source, they won't just have one area where that data is located. You will have many, and a lot of the time you're going to want to combine those in such a way that you can get a full picture of maybe a client's journey, maybe a specific case or issue that you've raised, or a variety of other things that you may have in your business. With any product in the Power Platform, we can start connecting all those data sources that allow you to leverage that capability. So if we touch on Powerapps again, Powerapps is going to allow us to take data from, again, a variety of those data sources, combine them together, and giving your user visibility of all the data they need before they start entering more info into the system. Power Automate, we could have a trigger that says, let's say daily, I want to send an email to this person, I want to update this planner, and I want to send an alert to my mobile device. Again, all that's possible using multiple connectors. And with Power BI, if you're taking data from a SQL database, you may also connect to SharePoint, an Excel file that's located somewhere. Again, all of that is possible within the application. So before I jump onto the next, we've got a couple of questions that have come through. We've got, can you recommend any Power resources beyond MS's own portal? Yes, I can. So I can try and get those links sent over afterwards. They'll probably come via marketing. There are a lot of tools in the Microsoft training portal. If you go to, I think it's learn.microsoft.com, you can see some of the exams that are possible. And within those exams, you have a series of learning tracks as well. So you can actually get some of the basics on how to create a Canvas app, model-driven app, and so on. I recommend that the best thing to do is actually start creating those apps yourselves. Start understanding some of the basics from the training material, and you'll find that you'll very quickly learn how to apply that to your own use case. We then have another question. So what is the best practice way to set up Powerapps and Power Automate that are used wider than your own personal use? There's quite a lot of things to go in there. We actually run some sessions where we can take you through actually how to have a best practice set up in your organization. There are some resources online as well, which we can try and share along with the licensing guide, which helps you go into that in more detail. You know, I won't go into all the best practices on here because again, it's quite a chunk over the entire suite. But what you really want to look at is how do you manage your environments? How do you get those configured? How do you license users for what they actually need to have access to, and so on. Okay, so the next point we want to look at is, you know, why bother using the Power Platform? Again, some of you will be using it, some of you won't be. You typically because it's been adopted everywhere else, and people don't adopt things if they're rubbish. So we've got what 86% of Fortune 500 companies are using Powerapps. That's quite a nice driving factor. You know, 2.7 times Powerapps year-on-year growth of active users, and it's across multiple different industries. So obviously it's having an impact there. With our client base, we're finding that more and more clients are using the Power Platform. More and more are leveraging the benefits of being able to integrate your data and have a central data location for reporting. So there's quite an incentive that we've seen from our side. There's an incentive being pushed by Microsoft. And if you ever touch on Powerapps in any capacity, Powerapps, Power BI, Power Automate, and so on, you'll start to realize there's actually some real benefit to get from those products. So the next bit, and usually the boring bit, but trust me, it's really informative, and I think you'll find it really insightful, is licensing. So the first one we're going to look at is Powerapps licensing. So you typically have 4 options. What a lot of people go for is just the per user, per app license at £7.50. Now, if you've got a CSP or an enterprise agreement, i.e. an EA, these licensing costs are going to be different, but fundamentally what I run through should give you some insight. What the per user, per app license will give you is it allow a user to create or will have access to 2 applications, and you can see that from the tables that I've got underneath. They also have access to a portal and can see a certain amount of data that resides within the common data service. The key thing there is they're using the common data service. Now, what you'll find is with this next license, where we've got the per user at £30.20, that per user license is going to give you unlimited access to the number of applications, portals, access to the common data service, and so on. But obviously, you may not want to give all your users that full use license. There's probably no need. Additionally, you maybe don't want those users creating apps in your production environments. So that's one way of how we can mitigate that. In an ideal deployment, again, if we're ignoring those bottom 2 options, you would have your developers with the per user license, and your end users utilizing the per app license as you have at the top there. Now, what you'll find is if you've already deployed Dynamics 365 or Office 365, you'll have something called use rights. Now, what use rights allows you to do is extend the functionality of your current investment. So let's take Office 365. If you've got SharePoint Online, OneDrive, and so on, Powerapps can integrate with those and further enhance that functionality. So typically when an organization wants to maybe run a Powerapps proof of concept and they want to automate a process, we've got a couple of examples where clients have used project management solutions, risk management, room booking systems. We can utilize things like SharePoint lists, and so on to actually start making those solutions a possibility without having to worry about the investment of databases in Azure and the cost overhead. So realistically, the only cost to you if you're using those use rights is the cost of time. And if you do want to bring in an external party in the short term, you've got that cost as well. The next product we're looking at is Power Automate. So got a few more options here. Again, like I've touched on, we've got use rights. So if you've already got 365, you're going to be able to start using the use rights in Powerapps, but also in Office 365 as well. So you've got a couple of options there. Now, what is that going to allow you to do? It allows you to interact with all your data in the 365 suite. There are some premium connectors. Typically, those are still accessible, but some of them may require an additional charge. If you're using things like MailChimp, typically you're paying for that service. So that'd be why it's classified as premium. If you don't want to go down that route, you have a per user license. Again, works in a similar way to the Powerapps per user. It allows them to create whatever they want, whenever they want. We also have something called per user with attended RPA. Now, what RPA is robotic process automation. The idea of being able to enter data into one form and then that data automatically gets logged in many different systems. And then we also have per flow. So you probably thinking, well, 377 quid for per flow license, that seems rather excessive. In the grand scheme of things, it probably isn't as excessive as you originally thought. So if you have a line of business application and you're doing a lot of data movement, typically you're not worrying about all your users doing that data movement. If you've got a 5,000 seat organization or even a 500 seat organization, going with a per flow license is considerably more cost effective than licensing every user for just one use case. Now, obviously, if there are many use cases, you do want to go with the per user license, but there's a couple of options that you can choose from. Next, we have Power BI licensing. This one can sometimes get a bit tricky. It really depends on what you've got at the moment in your environment. So if we look at the first option, which is free, you can get started today by downloading Power BI Desktop, connecting to your data, no limits on the data sources, and even publishing that to the Power BI service. The only downside is you can't share it with anyone. So if you want to create your own reports, or maybe create reports and then share a PDF or PowerPoint, free is probably the best way to go. I'd also recommend free if you're wanting to run a quick proof of concept or get an MVP set up, where we're trying to visualize your data and trying to understand the insight you're going to get out of it. There's no real point investing in licenses for everyone if you're going to run that short term. Now, if you want to start sharing those reports with people in your team, in your wider organization, maybe having dedicated workspaces to group those reports, or even external sharing, you can turn that off just to alleviate anyone's concerns. But if you do want to share, you can do. You're looking at around about £7.50 license. That's a per user per month license, and we'll give you access to all of the above. The next one is Power BI Premium. Now, the price tag can be off-putting to some. It definitely can be for smaller organizations. It's sometimes not worth it. For large organizations, it certainly is. So this is allowing pro users to share with free users. Therefore, you only need to license your developers. Now, that's not the only benefit. You get something called dedicated capacity. So if you ever look at the sort of software as a service model for Microsoft, typically you are in something called shared capacity, where on a specific server, you are basically sharing your instance with many other organizations. So if your usage goes up in one organization, there is a chance that your experience may be impacted very slightly. With dedicated capacity, you don't get that problem. Additionally, if you're going to quickly scale up and build many reports for use in many applications, that could even be embedded applications, so storing it into applications that you have on your phone and so on. Premium can be a good option if you've got such a large user base. Now, there is one downfall from Premium, which also gives you dedicated capacity and will allow you to have a premium style workspace, is Power BI embedded. So that's again allowing you to create pro content and share with free users, but essentially allows you to take that content and embed it into applications you may have in your phone and so on. All that's managed through Azure. So rather than being no code, there is a little bit of code you need to worry about here. But again, this is something that Visual could potentially help you out with. So we now have got a couple more questions. So can I use the Common Data Service connector in Powerapps and Power Automate on a Microsoft 365 E3 license? Unfortunately not. So typically the Common Data Service, it would require an additional license. So if you have a Powerapps per user license or a per app license, you're going to start using the Common Data Service. And if you've then got Power Automate, you can interact with it without a problem. With the premium connectors, it's really a case of on a per connector basis. So you'd probably need to look into that in a bit more detail. Again, there's loads of materials out there that explain some of the constraints of using those premium connectors. Let me just quickly get those out. The next and final product is Power Virtual Agents. Now, there's not much in terms of licensing that we have around this. It is very much a here's everything or nothing. It's £754 for the tenant. That'll give you access to 1,000 bots, several thousand sessions per month. And if memory serves me correctly, you may be able to expand that further as well with additional bolt-ons. Again, £754 a month may seem quite extortionate, but if you look at the benefit your business is going to get with that high rate of client interaction, there's a lot of justification there. What you'll also find is that's going to give you additional capacity as well with the Common Data Service. So if we look at the Common Data Service as a whole, by default, in your default environment, when you set up any 365 tenant, you will have a gig available for storing apps and so on. If you start using bolt-ons like Dynamics 365, that expands the capacity and gives you the access to create a database. The same with Power Virtual Agents. It's giving you that capacity in the Common Data Service and giving you file capacity. As soon as you start building capacity, that is when you can start interacting with it. So again, sort of in answer to some of the questions, just if you need to interact with a Common Data Service, you'll need capacity. So that is purchased through per user licenses, per flow licenses, or additionally here, you could get quite a nice chunk and additional features with Power Virtual Agents. So we've looked at the Power Platform. We've looked at quite a few bits and pieces there. Now, the next thing we'll look at is Dynamics 365. So a lot of you are thinking, well, you know, Dynamics is quite expensive, it's quite a beast in itself. You're totally right. But actually what you'll find is it may become quite viable as you start adopting more of the Power Platform. So if you think with a Power Platform solution, you are typically automating a business process, typically automating data capture and processing, and then storing that somewhere. What Dynamics allows you to do is essentially give you all of those things, but pre-made. So rather than you having to invest in development to start off with, or ongoing development, if you just go with Dynamics, all of that's done for you. What you'll also find is if you're creating case management systems, sales processes, marketing systems, field service options, so people out in the field, rather than creating many Powerapps and trying to license all your users to use them, Dynamics may be the better option where it's all been made for you. So one of the things it can give you is intelligent sales and marketing. So there's Dynamics 365 for sales, and there's also one for marketing, which allows you to manage your end-to-end sales process or do email marketing. So sending content out to your client base, capturing their responses, seeing if they're interested in events and so on. And actually how you've kind of joined this session is a result of those emails being sent out from our central marketing platform and we use Dynamics 365 for sales, and we use 365 marketing as well. Proactive customer service. So if you're looking at Dynamics 365 customer service, we can take requests into potentially a mailbox, log those against contacts that you have in your system, and therefore have that complete picture of who is your client, have they raised these issues in the past, is there any other information that we need to capture from them, and so on. We've got connected field service. So if you've got people out in the field, they could be, so we've got one client who works with cables. They may go out, take pictures of the cables, do a couple of different bits and pieces, and maybe go to a central location to see the number of jobs that they have. Field service can help you with that. The added benefit of using Dynamics as well is it's got offline functionality built into it. So if they log on in the morning, they can see their jobs list, go out into the field, do their job, mark them off, and once they get connectivity again, it'll auto submit. So you've got, again, that full vision or that full view of that user and what they're doing. We've got modern finance and operations. So this is looking at your ERP or enterprise resource planning systems. Where are your resources? How much is that costing you? How much is your organization making, and so on? All that is possible with those tools. Now, there's a couple of options there. I think they had Dynamics 365 for finance, and there used to be one called Business Central. I think that's still there for now. Those are two different products that kind of do the same thing. One of them is aimed to more of a smaller organization, which is lighter weight. As a result, it's cheaper. One of them is designed for more of a larger enterprise, and as a result, it's a little bit more expensive, but gives you more features to complement that cost. And finally, we've got connected commerce as well. So it's taking your product catalog, looking at options on how you can sell those, and creating portals for your users to sign in and buy those products. So if we take a look at the actual licensing, you can see there's many different products here, and within each product category, there are many different add-ons. So if you only want the very basics of, let's say, customer service, you don't need to invest in the whole product suite. Doing so, it would be quite a chunk of cost, and if you're not going to see the immediate benefit of that, there's no real point in pursuing it. Now, the way the actual licensing breakdown works is typically you would buy a core license and an add-on. So let's say you were looking to buy Dynamics for sales. In the first instance, for the least amount of functionality, you may just go with the £49 a month per user cost. Now, again, on CSP and on an EA, it's going to be slightly different. It's going to be less, but fundamentally, this is how it works. And let's say at a future point in time, you say, well, actually, I want a sales premium for a couple of users. There's nothing stopping you from just buying those licenses for a set of users, and they will automatically get that enhanced functionality. If you want to then add on a customer insights, so that is looking at your client base over all of your products and creating useful insights automatically out of the box. Again, you can add that on as a bolt-on. Now, what you'll notice is on the right-hand side, we have sales professional 49, but we also have 15. So if you've already got Dynamics in your organization, you don't need to worry about pricing it up to be an extra £50 per person per month. Again, that'd be rather excessive. So if you've already got sales professional and you want to buy another Dynamics product, it's just using the bolt-on cost. So it's a heavily reduced cost, down to 15 quid. That will give you that added functionality. Now, some licenses don't work on a per user basis. They work on a per tenant basis. So in the case of marketing, you're not licensing it per user, you're doing it over the entire tenant. And again, if you've already got a qualifying Dynamics product, it's essentially half price. Again, there are other bolt-ons to this. So we have things like customer voice, so that is sending out surveys and capturing feedback. And we have the customer insight, which is giving us that whole package. If you look at marketing as a whole, if you have all three of those products, you've got a really nice starter to really understanding your client, what their needs are, and how you can provide a better service as an organization. Now, that doesn't necessarily need to be external. It could be internal marketing, but you've got quite a few options there. So the next thing I want to touch on is some examples that we've had from clients where maybe they didn't want to go down the Dynamics route fully. They wanted to look at things around the Power Platform and so on. So in this case, we're looking at a case management system with some extended functionality. Now, this specific organization said we want a case management system. We don't want too much development up front. We just want to buy something off the shelf, but where possible, can we extend some of that functionality? So what we've done here, we've used a quite a lightweight set of CRM. So we're looking at Sales Professional, which is the lower tier of Dynamics Customer Service. We've then decided to use Powerapps and the Common Data Service. So the Common Data Service will be deployed alongside Sales Professional, and Powerapps is allowing us to expand on that functionality. So what we can do is take Sales Professional, add some features into there, but for some other users in the organization, they may only want a small subset of that data or access to certain forms. You can use Powerapps to leverage that. From the back of it, we then want to send email notifications out to those users. We can configure those in Dynamics directly using Power Automate flows. We can do things like data classification. So as we're getting cases through, we can pick out common words to say that this is most likely due to this issue, or we can automatically categorize that as being a infrastructure problem or for front-end application and so on. One of the other examples we have is external data sharing through a portal. So this was a full-fledged Dynamics 365. This was the entire product suite, and allowing their sales team to consume data or enter data into the system and allow their clients to view the data that they're entering. Now, the way we do this, we use Powerapps to create an external facing portal, and we have essentially all our end users being able to access a portal to view content. And all of that, again, is possible with the Common Data Service. So off the back of this, we're then using Power BI to interact with the Common Data Service to present that data to key stakeholders, allowing them to understand where they need to invest in next, what products and services should they be pitching to clients, and so on. And again, wrapped in all of this, we don't have it on the screen, but we're using Power Automate to send those emails. So in terms of, well, you know, we've given you quite a lot of content here. Hopefully you've got a slightly better idea on how licensing works. Before I answer any more questions that you want to send through, so if you want to send them through now, I can quickly go through them. Rachel can obviously use some other services and then help you out with some next steps. So we have essentially not just the 3 services we have on the screen here, we've got quite a few more. So if you see something that you like and you want to talk to us, more than happy for you to inquire, and we can get on a phone call at some point in the near future to discuss those. But sort of the next steps from this session would be something like an app in a day. An app in a day workshop is essentially a way of creating a Power App using quite a fixed agenda, which allows you to scale up your team quite quickly. So in addition to the question that I answered earlier on top of the Microsoft resources, you can also get someone to come in and train up your team. And we've had quite a lot of success there, and we've got some really good feedback, which we can obviously share with you if you're interested. Now, the deliverable out of that day is typically a fully fledged application. It's a device management app, so it allows you to purchase devices for the organization and allow people to request new devices. But it also gives you a good idea of how does a Power App work, how can you get automation working, and if there's sufficient time in the day, we can also touch on how to use Power BI to interact with that data further. Now, that typically uses a travel license, and we'll also start using the Common Data Service as well. So if you do any concerns around what you can and can't interact with the Common Data Service, we can touch on those as well. The next product we're sort of pushing here is the Trusted Advisor. So it's all good, us coming in and doing some training for you, but really you're going to want to learn about your own data, what architecture we can put in place, what the next steps are, and how do we align that with your strategy. That's what a Trusted Advisor is there for. We'll come in, we'll help you make those key decisions, or try and get you the information needed to make them. Typically, a follow-on from that would be potentially a multi-day project, which may include something like a Power Platform Quick Start, which is our final product that we have on here. The Quick Start allows us to interact with your data directly. We can then start creating a variety of different reports, visualizations, automated flows, and so on. And I've been working on one of those this past week, which has gone really well. Users are now getting hands-on with their applications, they are being able to create their own apps from their own data, and we've got a element of governance in place with a centre of excellence that allows them to really start adopting the technology. But even more important than that, we are automating process, reducing downtime, and reducing cost for managing these lengthy processes. So I've noticed that no questions have come through, so I'll jump on to the next bit. Thanks for joining today. It's been been a pleasure to present to you folks. If you've got any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to fire them over. If you want to get some pre-sales calls there, we can do those as well. We do have some other sessions booked in for today, so if you haven't seen them, here they are. We've got Empowering Your People Through Digital Inclusion, which is running from 1 till 2. And we've got Automation Training Taster Session. So the Automation Training Taster Session may be something that you'll be interested in if you've enjoyed this session as well. Okay, so I'll leave the links on screen for a few moments. If you've got any questions in the meantime, please send them through. Okay. In that case, thank you for joining, everyone. Hopefully we get some time in the future to go through some other options and discuss where you folks are in your journey and how we can progress you through to the next step.